And now, aviation weather around Alaska. Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook for Friday into Saturday. We're going to have some rather active weather shaping up along the Gulf Coast, up into the southern mainland and areas out over the lower Bering Sea, Aleutian, Alaska Peninsula. So what is happening is we're going to have a lead area of low pressure pull up here toward the northern Gulf as we go into Friday, and that's going to bring a surge of warm, moist air that's going to bring initially some snow that'll change over to heavy rain in areas of the Panhandle, and then heavier snow developing, especially along the intercoastal mountains here along the Gulf Coast, and pushing inland across the Copper River Basin on up toward the middle upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile gold country, and eventually up into the Yukon Flats as we go through the course of the weekend. The heaviest snows, though, will be here in and along the Copper River Basin and any of the intercoastal mountains. It's looking now like the storm track is going to stay far enough east that it should spare Anchorage any heavy snowfall this weekend. There'll be several impulses of low pressure coming up out of the North Pacific into the Gulf this weekend into the middle of next week. One of those could pull enough moisture back to potentially impact the Anchorage Bowl as we go toward late Tuesday, middle of next week, but that still remains uncertain. What is certain, very cold air right now that's over the central eastern interior is going to migrate southwestward and southward and then eventually pull across the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula this weekend. There'll even be a little impulse mesolow that comes across the eastern Aleutians that'll really enhance some gusty winds and heavy snow showers or snow squalls. We also expect extreme freezing spree along areas here of the Bering Sea and around the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, off of the southwest coast. So a lot going on there. Taking a look at Friday afternoon, notice the IFR conditions becoming widespread across much of the Panhandle here through the central eastern Gulf, and we're also seeing moisture feeding northward up into the Copper River Basin and then pushing through Isabel and Mentasta passes. I would expect IFR conditions to be developing there along the eastern Alaska range, along with gusty winds blowing snow and some falling snow by Friday night into Saturday as that moisture surge spreads further inland along the eastern portion of the mainland and along the Alcan border. For Saturday morning, widespread IFR now pushing up toward the Yukon Flats all across the 40-mile gold country, Fairbanks southward through the Copper River Basin along the northeastern Gulf in through the Panhandle. These areas here will see rain and fog. Some of the rain could be heavy on top of just a heavy, deep snowpack from the two big storms that hit the Juneau area, Icy Strait area here within the last 10 days. Now, further west, we have clear skies. We've seen temperatures as of this Thursday morning. It's been 53 below at Fort Yukon, 50 below at Bettles. That cold air is migrating toward the southwest. As this low comes up, these series of lows come up, it's going to pull down that bitterly cold Arctic air and push it across the Bering Sea, the eastern Aleutians, and the Alaska Peninsula. Saturday afternoon, same thing. We see that moisture feed riding further north all the way up along eastern Brooks Range, eastern North Slope to the Arctic coast, so there could be snow and some blowing snow with that. And then we have a continuation of IFR conditions, low ceilings, precipitation, mainly warm, warmer air causing rain with the exception of the higher elevations around the north end of the Panhandle, especially toward Canadian border. Chilkoot and White Passes will likely get heavy snow. Areas like Thompson Pass getting blasted with prolonged period of heavy snow and even at times blizzard conditions. But the cold air is even going to settle into the Susitna Valley. That's a thing that's going to allow temperatures to cool even further here in the west end of the Kenai and in through middle upper Cook Inlet. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Also strong winds coming through Shelikof Strait as a result of low pressure being in this position. And again, all these areas, marine areas here, they have open water. We'll have to be dealing with the potential for heavy to extreme freezing spray. And at Tuvik Pass on Friday should generally see VFR conditions hold there. Same thing Adigan Pass, though that will be changing by Saturday as that moisture pushes farther north. Lake Clark and Merrill, generally VFR conditions there, the west arm of the Alaska Range coming up there through rainy and windy passes on Friday. Generally VFR conditions will hold because we expect the big moisture push to be coming up through the North Gulf into the Copper River Basin. As we get further east, though, Isabel and Mentasta passes will see MVFR conditions become IFR. If not by Friday afternoon, certainly Friday night into Saturday. There will also be gusty winds, some falling snow as well as blowing snow. And Tanita Pass will see MVFR conditions also become IFR and deteriorate, especially Friday afternoon into Friday evening. Portage Pass starts out VFR, becoming MVFR. The heaviest precipitation just east of there, especially as you get out there into the central eastern portion of Prince William Sound and along the northeastern Gulf Coast. That's where the steadiest, heaviest stream of moisture will be coming northward. And then we expect Chilkoot and White will be socked in with IFR conditions. You're going to have low ceilings, heavy snowfall developing. The works here as we go into the weekend. Further south as we go through the other areas of the Panhandle, snow changing to moderate to occasionally heavy rain. Obviously, there'll be some fog, gusty winds as the frontal system pushes up into that area beginning later Friday and into Saturday. So notice freezing levels aloft bump upwards to above 6,000 and 8,000 feet south of Haida Gwaii. So as that warmer air pulls back toward the north and northwest, it's going to cause freezing levels to rise here across the Panhandle, especially there in the north, though initially precipitation will fall as snow in the lower elevations, and then the freezing line runs along the Gulf Coast, and then this freezing line Friday morning will be pushing southward of the Aleutians, at least the eastern Aleutians, and pushing well south of the Alaska Peninsula as that bitterly cold Arctic air begins to move off the mainland and then down across the lower southeastern quadrant of the Bering Sea. The greatest threat for icing Friday will be in association with that front and surge of moisture and warmer air aloft. We expect freezing, considerable moderate icing above 4,000 and 6,000 feet here across the Panhandle. And notice there's the potential as that moisture begins to creep northward. Some isolated moderate icing up the Copper River Basin into places like Isabel Pass. Now, jet stream level winds 30,000 feet. We have this trough. This trough is going to dig southward, and that's what's forcing the impulses of low pressure in the mid and lower levels of the atmosphere northward. And when we look at the 9,000 foot level winds or 700 millibar winds, same thing. We're going to have also, as we go through the weekend, there's going to be an impulse drop down, and this will be the case into early next week. That's going to come down along the west side of the state. This mid-level low will also continue to feed this moisture up along areas of the Panhandle into the northern Gulf. Eventually, some of that could get pulled back toward Anchorage early middle of next week. We'll have to stay tuned because that's still a wild card exactly where that will set up because the moisture gradient is very sharp. But we do have at 3,000 feet strong winds in excess of 60 knots along the British Columbia coast, 40 knot winds out of the south coming up there into the southern western Panhandle. Broad area of northeast winds off the southwest mainland, 35 to 50 knots. And then all along the Aleutian chain, generally 40, 45 knot northeasterly winds there. And as a result, we expect widespread turbulence first here in through much of the Panhandle. There could even be some isolated severe turbulence as you get from south of Dixon Entrance to between Haida Gwaii and the British Columbia coast, surface to 6,000 feet, and then a broad area of moderate turbulence, southwest mainland extending down the Alaska Peninsula and back through the Aleutians, including St. Paul. We do expect widespread moderate turbulence along this area and brisk northeasterly flow, surface to 3,000 and surface to 4,000 feet.